Hi. Oh, an audible hello. Thank you. How's everyone doing tonight? Audible, great. This is fantastic. Usually I have to tell people that they're allowed to yell in the library, but you're already making noise. How's everyone doing tonight? All right. We'll get more enthusiasm later, right? My name's Aiden Flax-Clark. I'm the director of Life from NYPL, so I am thrilled that you're all here tonight. And to everyone who's watching online, welcome. Wherever you are, we're just very glad that you're with us. Tonight it is my distinct privilege to introduce Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, who is here, of course, to talk about her new book, What If We Get It Right? Visions of Climate Futures. That's right. Give it up. Some of you pre-ordered the book, yes? Beautiful. You're the best. And those of you who haven't pre-ordered it, you will soon be the best when you purchase your copy outside. It's available for purchase from the library shop. And I believe it's being signed afterward. I forgot to ask, but great. I'm getting some nods. I'm told it is. If so, it will be right up here. Through essays, art, data, and conversations with activists and artists, farmers, and financiers, Ayana asked this very radical question. Our climate future is not yet written, but what if we act as if we love the future? And the result is obviously this book, which we are thrilled to help you, encourage you to read. And of course, if you didn't pick it up earlier, can't pick it up tonight, obviously everyone has a library card. I don't even need to ask, why would you even come in this building if you didn't have a library card? It would be total shame. You'd be embarrassed. You would never do it. You can use your library card to get a copy of it as well. Although if I had to guess, there's probably like 8 million holds on it because it's a very popular book. But get your name in there and check it out. I want to tell you about some upcoming live events we have throughout the rest of the year. This Friday is our annual Halloween costume contest, which is judged by Tim Gunn and NYPL librarians. And it's a book-themed costume contest, one of the most fun nights of the year. Next Monday, we have a very fun event right here in this room, readings from the archives of New York true crime stories. It's going to have Adrian Moore from Orange is the New Black and Jack McCoy himself, Sam Waterston from Law & Order. It is actually sold out, but it's going to be online, so I can't encourage you enough to check it out. We also have next week Glory Edom, and in the weeks and months ahead, conversations with Myra Kalman, a conversation about a very interesting sheet music collection we just acquired from New York's oldest Yiddish radio station. And at the end of the year, our Library After Hours, which is one of the best events we do all year, featuring James Baldwin, who is the subject of a very excellent show up at the Schomburg Center and also part of our Treasures exhibition. So all of that is free, first of all, so you have no excuse not to come. And it's all at our website, nypl.org/live, and you can sign up for our newsletters to get the earliest notices of when registration is available. So if you haven't done that, please do. When you walked in the room, you all got note cards along with your programs. Those are for asking questions. Ayana would love to take some of your questions later on. So write them down when you're inspired, and some of my colleagues will come by and pick them up during the conversation, and they will get to as many as they can at the end of the talk. I think there's also another card in there that she is going to explain later, so if you're wondering about that other thing, you will find out soon. Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Isbahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and more importantly by all of you here, all of you watching online. So thank you very much for being here, and please give it up for Ayana Elizabeth Johnson.
Hello. Hi. Oh my gosh, this is such an enormous treat. I was walking into the library tonight looking at those lions and thinking, like, middle school library nerd me is like totally shook right now. So thank you for making this part of my dream come true. We're going to have a very special conversation tonight, and I'll introduce my conversation partner shortly. But first, I just wanted to orient you all a little bit to the book. What if we get it right is a question so big, I needed to call a lot of smart people to help me answer it, including Regine Clement, who's sitting here in the front row, who is interviewed in the Since Billionaires Exist chapter. And so this book turned into a series of 20 interviews that are abridged and transcribed because just paraphrasing other people I always find to be very annoying when I'm reading a book as a reader, I'm like, if all you're going to do is tell me what other people think, why am I even reading this book? So I thought, let me just let them speak for themselves. And so the audiobook actually has all 20 of these interviews and everyone's voices in it. So if you're more of an audio person, that is a thing that exists. And I just, through creating this book, realized how much I love being in the role of curator and question asker. And so throughout the book, there are so many what if questions that open each of the sections. And what if we act as if we love the future is, in fact, my favorite one. My second favorite is what if climate solutions were beautiful, because that is an option that exists for us. But the book is 20 interviews, all different topics, from farmers and foresters to journalists to community organizers to policymakers to architects and designers, tech executives, truly all over the map. And of course, essays by me and original art commissioned for the book and poetry, because the idea is that there are so many different ways, so many different entry points into answering this question, and that the last word from me on the back of the book and the first word from me in the introduction are the same word, and it's welcome. I've realized over the course of my book tour, this is day like 38 or something now, that's my role in the climate movement, is to welcome as many people as possible into finding their roles. So this is not an exclusive role. You can also be a welcomer. Please be a welcomer. We truly need everyone. So tonight, when this event was announced, it was going to be me in conversation with Dr. Kate Marvel, my favorite climate scientist, and maybe yours as well. But she and her whole family are down with some sort of nasty flu, and she very generously did not bring that to us. And so the plan B is the best plan B I have ever had in my life, which is my cousin, who wrote a poem that appears in this book, is going to ask me a bunch of very personal questions in front of you all about how my views on all sorts of things evolved and how this book came to be and the role that our family has played in shaping my perspective. So this will be a very sweet friends and fam New York conversation. And so with that, I'm going to read you my cousin's official biography as it appears in the book. And then he will appear, I think, through that door on cue. Let's see if it works. Steve Connell. Oh, I'm supposed to be clicking slides, I think, here. This is what we're doing tonight. Steve Connell is an acclaimed spoken word artist who believes story is an act of survival. He is a 2-time national poetry champion whose work explores democracy and technology, climate and racial justice, family and grief, purpose and possibility, and of course, love. In addition to registering more than 1 million voters while touring with the Declaration of Independence, he is my favorite cousin. Please welcome Steve Connell.
Thank you, cousin Ayana.
You're so welcome.
Dr. Elizabeth Ayana Johnson. That's not your name. Your name is
Close.
I got the words right. I'm very nervous, very excited. And that's one of the best intros I've gotten. And part of the reason I'm nervous and excited is because there's this is what I do for a living. I'm a professional artist, a professional poet. But suddenly I'm a cousin and a proud family member and simultaneously a human who understands that my cousin has grown up to be a revolutionary. And
I'm the baby cousin on both sides of my family.
She is,
helpful
yes.
Context here.
This is true. So I will tell you more stories. We will talk. But let me, since I'm here longer, I'm not off the stage. I'll read the poem and we'll jump in. I'll do my best Kate Marvel impression. This living earth. Believe about the beginnings. what you will. This much we know for certain. At some point, darkness released its grip on light. The night cracked wide, the universe unclenched its jaws, and life began to talk. The very synapses of existence began firing at once, moving as one thought since the beginning. Oh, it has been this way when all life on earth communicated without words, and still today. In the twisting swirl of a million butterflies, the schools of fish fast twitching in the surf, and the delicate reaching up of vines, in the shared mind of a stampede pounding, or beneath ground in the sound of mycelial nerves extending, this resounding language of connection is observed. But at some point, the harmony was broken, a dissonance occurred, and slowly, the new song of humankind was heard with words like manifest destiny, industrial revolution, dominion over all, survival of the fittest, urban sprawl. And as the song of life became a solo, a new thought began. Perhaps the world was not alive after all, but we were simply alive on it. And with that thought, the world became a fixed thing. It simply was, as the sun or space or rocks, as if it could never be diminished, as if our actions could never cause it harm. But we were wrong. Oh, and now we have evolved to become both destroyer and savior. Our behavior is our greatest threat, yet hope resides in our resolve, in our collective compassion and formidable talents, the way we rise to any challenge once we accept we have no choice. And that is why, if from this moment forward, in our voice, you once again hear a harmony with the earth, then from out of destruction our rebirth comes, and isn't that what life does best? It goes on. When it seems like it is finished, it survives. That is why, in the most hostile conditions in existence, something thrives. From toxic soil, a mushroom grows. In a desiccated riverbed, water flows. In a still smoldering forest, a flower leans into the wind, and in the midst of this vast expanse spins a planet comprised of promise, spark of light, oxygen and bone, photosynthesis, salt water, honeycomb, hydrogen atom, skin cell, hair follicle, matted fur, acetone, slice of wing, wind current, opposable thumb, cyclone, dorsal fin, deep breath, ozone, atmospheric river, heart valve, limestone. All life is connected. Nothing lives alone on this one and only living earth. Home.
Thank you, Steve. That's my cousin.
That's my cousin. We have transitioned into the living room.
We grew up together. I know. Hearing you, the last line, being home feels right. And having this be like a stop in my hometown feels right. So I think you're asking me some questions.
Well, it'll go back and forth.
Oh,
the thing
let's
that
start
probably
here.
won't
We had a
happen
plan.
Is, yes, she's going to look at her notes from time to time. But luckily, I'm hoping that there will be no spontaneous, now that she's sung with Stacey Abrams, that I will not be singing. There will be maybe some joking, but you don't want me singing.
No,
but
he has his strengths. That's not one of them.
That is not.
But let's talk about poetry.
Okay,
so
let's
you've
do it.
I remember you as a poet first from the perspective of you as a freestyle rapper in our aunt and uncle's driveway, and me being like, how does he do that? How is his brain and his mouth, like, how are they fast enough to make us all crack up and gasp and all this stuff? And then to transition to spoken word and being a national slam poetry champion and all my friends in college thinking that my cousin was extremely cool. And I'm curious, from your perspective, like, how hard is it? You haven't done a lot of nature poetry historically. It's been a lot of like love,
You hear the judgment
grief.
in that. There's a little bit. If you haven't done.
And I'm curious why that is. Like, is there something that writing about nature that's actually harder? Or is it less personal for you? Or like, because we're related, but we had very different childhoods in a lot of ways. So,
Yes.
yeah, what was special about this poem?
Well, it's sitting next to me. I mean, I think a big part of, I have written a lot. I think as poets and artists, we're pulled by what we're pulled by. So what is certain about this is it's one of the most significant pieces of mine about nature that have been published in a New York Times bestseller by my cousin that is now apparently available in the New York Public Library. So yes, you should applaud. We should everybody applaud the library.
This is the danger of having family. They just like want to hype you, which is very sweet. But like, let's keep it moving.
So that is like so. A lot of the poems I've written on nature haven't been published, is what I'm saying. So you haven't seen them, and probably there is some anxiety to share those particular poems with you.
Probably not assuaged by the fact that when I asked you if you had a poem that you would want to include in this book, you sent me a few.
Right.
And I was like, this is the one, but also it has to be 2 pages max.
Yes.
And it was spoken word poems are like, it was like 6-7 pages. And I was like, hope it's okay. I took a first cut at editing this down for you to 2 pages.
Yes.
Which is so rude to do to a poet. But I was like, he's my cousin and we're up against the deadline, so hopefully he'll understand. And you were incredibly gracious about it. And in fact, the thing that shocked me the most about that experience was how welcoming you were of my feedback about like which pieces I thought were the most exciting and provocative for people. But you also said that you hadn't really been edited in that way before.
Right. Yeah, because it is the difference between being a stage poet and a page poet is I edit ferociously.
Look at him rhyming.
See that? Ferociously on my own. My first real experience with being edited was Norman Lear, and that same need to be able to tell these incredible stories, but collapse them down to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 pages. So and
that's the line in his bio where he was registering 1 million voters, traveling with the Declaration of Independence. Was that tour with Norman when he bought a copy of it?
Yes, he bought
a copy.
The guy bought a painting for $4 that he didn't like at a flea market. Went home, he liked the frame, so he tore it open to get the frame and found a Declaration of Independence in the back. So his $4 investment became $8 million.
What?
Yeah.
Norman,
go to flea markets, kids.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And it was one of the 25 that still exist of the 200 original Declaration of Independences, and so. Back then, I toured with Norman with several other poets to excite people about democracy.
Especially college kids and get them registered. Yeah. We are in that moment again.
We're in that moment again for sure.
So everyone, please. There's a huge sign outside of the New York Public Library that just says vote. So take their word for it.
For sure. Well, and obviously climate change and climate justice and what your book is so, wonderfully about is a critical aspect of what we're voting for now more than others, and what I think your book, and you've done a great job, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that, but the aspects of what is the understanding of this moment towards our future in terms of these decisions that we are making around environment, towards voting, what informs that so powerfully for you? Is it personal? Is it?
I mean, I'm a human living on this planet. It's my only home. I'm not going to Mars.
You won't.
So this is it.
Yeah.
I mean, go big or lose home is the way I've been putting it. And so, I think there's been obviously a lot of focus on the presidential race and on the topic of climate.
Right.
The choice could not be more clear.
Yeah.
But when it comes to all the other positions down ballot, we don't talk about that enough.
Right.
Like, who are your city council members? Who are your public utility commissioners? Who are your port commissioners, your mayors, your state representatives? Those are the people who are deciding how quickly and how justly we transition off of fossil fuels and protect nature, etc. Do we have municipal composting? Are they taking it away and putting it back again in New York City? Like, what's the plan? Are we investing in our subway system? Are we doing congestion pricing? For the love of God, right? The people making these decisions are not the president of the United States of America. So it really matters that we research the climate platforms of the people we vote for in local elections.
And in terms of then, as we think about this book, and you writing a book, which to me, all of us are poets, and the future is creative. And so whether it's a thesis, whether it's a dissertation, whether it's a novel or an equation, it is poetry, right? It is this creative force towards solutions manifesting. So I guess with that, I'm curious about your relationship with art. Why it's in the hands of some other scientists, maybe it's a textbook, but in your hands, it became a workshop, a conversation. And I'm curious too, with that, since you integrate art, you integrate poetry, you obviously have a love for poets. Have you written much poetry and about nature? And was that maybe part of your beginnings towards writing?
Oh.
You can take that in whatever way you like.
I remember writing a poem when I was very young. I'm trying to remember. It was really short. I'm trying to remember it. It's about clouds. And just like loving the clouds because they made the sky more interesting. And that was my first attempt to try to like capture something in writing. I don't write a lot of poetry now, but I do love words. Yeah. And I think for anyone who's read even just the first chapter of this book, you'll get a sense for my deep love of language and attempt to be, I would say, not so much poetic perhaps as melodic. I mean, as you well know, I was trained as a jazz singer growing up. So there's a little bit of that like rhythm and cadence and melody that I'm trying to capture. Yeah. And it's funny, like once people know that, they're like, oh yes, we hear it in your voice now. Sure. But you asked more broadly about art. Yeah. And so my father, your Uncle Archie, was an artist. Yes. A potter, an architect. And so being raised by someone who sees the world as a thing that was designed and created, and literally walking through New York City with someone who's like, that building has good shoulders. Like the Chrysler building is a good building. Do you see that?
Did you say it has good shoulders?
Good shoulders, yeah.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Right? Those lintels are going to fall apart in 5 years. This is crap, right? Yeah. And so I'm literally being trained. I'm going to the Museum of Modern Art with my father and having him taking me to the furniture exhibition and me thinking it was the most intense April Fool's trick that anyone has ever played, because I was like, all our furniture is in the museum. Yes. How did he pull this up? It's just like an Ames chair. Like, everyone knows what those look like. They're very common now.
And but going to her house in Brooklyn was to walk into an art gallery. Like every aspect from
Jamaican painters, my
painting,
dad's
the pottery, the albums, the furniture.
2,000 jazz records. Yeah. So it was just like, that was the world I grew up in, and our neighbors were jazz musicians, and I like took classes at the Met in the summer and went to Broadway shows all the time and was like a modern dancer. Like I was very much, my parents were like, you can't make a living as a jazz musician. Like, please have that be your hobby. Yeah. They said, let Steven be the artist in the family. The world needs more. Maybe. Thanks for taking that bullet for us. But my mother was like, the world needs more black scientists. Yeah. And so, but you never give up your love of all things arts, right? And so when I was putting this book together as a solo curatorial project, I was like, how can I make a climate book that no one else could have made.
Yeah.
So you have to imbue your own your personality into it. And I became the art director for the book.
What?
Because I was so clear on like the correct way to convey the information through design. And so this is like maybe my proudest thing is if you look on the copyright page, you'll see art direction by Ayana Elizabeth Johnson.
And why, to me, it challenges us to reimagine, again, what we think of as art and see art in everything and understand the same way her dad, my uncle, saw the shoulders of a building is to reimagine a textbook as a book of poetry or or instructions to a game that, if played properly, will save the earth while having fun doing it. Bing, bang.
What Steve said, yes, please. Hearing you say that, like, it makes me think of just how the cover was designed. I like first sketched this on the back of a napkin in an oyster bar in Maine. But the reason it's designed this way is to give it mostly white space, so that we are given enough space to envision the future. Normally it goes like title, subtitle, author, but the title is the most important thing, and the visions of climate futures. Sorry, I'm supposed to be switching the slide.
She's asking too much.
This is how you open the book. You basically have to hold visions of climate futures as the way you open the book. So this is my like subliminal message to prepare for that. And then my name, whatever, just like balance out the symmetry, put me in upper corner. So there's like a lot of little touches like that. And you open the book and you're like, wait, what? The cover was so boring. What's happening now? You see this salvage punk retro futurist art by Olulake and Jayfus.
And I was going to say, that painting photo, what would you say?
I would call it like a digital collage, like a photo montage.
And that's part of a collection that you curated at the Brooklyn Academy of Music,
at Pioneer Works.
Pioneer Works, right.
Arts institution in Brooklyn. Yeah, I curated an art show there last year called Climate Futurism. So I'm just really infiltrating your space.
Well, yes, you are. Well,
I grew up in LA. Was like watched all the movies,
I ain't mad at that at all.
stuff.
I mean, I'm working on an album now, and I guarantee you're going to get an ask to sing on one of the tracks.
Okay, all right.
Because I ain't going to sing on it. But what is also there is the way, again, art infiltrates and maybe must infiltrate. I mean, it isn't just that you're encroaching on my space. It's more, I think, an understanding as we reimagine what the world must be. We understand that how we move through space, how we think about space has to change. And I think that you said something unique in terms of, I think you said earlier when you were talking about these different aspects of your artistry, one doesn't give those up. And I think it's more one mustn't. And I feel that in some of your message that a lot of people do. A lot of people think the work.
The growing up.
Yes.
The things we leave behind. Yeah, and that's the other thing we leave behind when we're growing up is our like sense of awe and wonder and love of nature, the biophilia, to use E.O. Wilson's term, right? Like the love of life. Like, of course we should protect this thing. Ask any child who learns about whales and learns that there aren't enough of them anymore. And they're like, well, we should do something about that. Like, and grown-ups lose that unless you very deliberately nurture it.
Right.
And so that's something I've had to sort of fight to hold on to. Like, I literally hug trees and I pet moss I remind myself why I do this work.
And I was going to say, is that an act of like which one leads the other in terms of that refusal to give up on the love for the planet, which makes you who you are? Or is it an understanding, because you talked at the beginning of this intro that your job is to welcome us into this space.
It's something that we all share, right? And that many of us lost touch with, and that I hope that people reconnect with in whatever aspects of nature sort of drive them, motivate them the most. But also, because you're a poet and you're my cousin, I will say, you write and talk a lot about love, and I do too, from this perspective of like, what if we act as if we love the future?
Right. What if we,
And there's polling data that shows that the number one motivator for climate action, 12 times more popular than, say, economic growth, is love for future generations. And so I think we really need to just embrace that and think about that as what really is at the heart of all of it, which as a scientist and analytical mind is so weird for me to be sitting here saying to you that like the answer is love.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but it is.
And also isn't it part of the problem that it feels strange to ask science to separate itself from love, to ask humans to separate themselves from the primal forces that drive us as a way of existing.
As if like all we need is a more rigorous cost-benefit analysis.
Right. Please.
And let me tell you, that is not actually what's holding us back. It is taking that leap of faith into the future together, right? And it is this sense of collective purpose and each finding our roles and having this, wellspring of motivation. I think I could quickly find this quote from Rachel Carson, one of my early inspirations. I had a science teacher who said, read any biography of a scientist. And I picked, my mother picked for me. This will not surprise you.
My goodness.
She was like, you will be reading this one. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. And that's
Read it one
the
more
whole
time.
thing. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. Yes, and my last word of that chapter is be tenacious on behalf of life on earth. I mean, worth a shot, no?
Yes, definitely worth a shot.
Let's ask some of these questions we prepared. Huh? Shall we? Return to the script slightly? I mean, one of the things that I think is so special about what you've brought to my life and to our family is not just your poetry, but your humor, right? Like you had an improv comedy group in LA. Tangent. Shout out to Tangent with one of our other cousins, Joseph, was in it. And I never got to go to one of those because I lived in New York, but when I would see you out in Spokane for like Christmas or the clam bake, you guys would put on versions of it in the driveway. And I was so inspired, similarly to your freestyling, like how are they coming up with jokes right now? Yeah. With no preparation?
What is the science of this?
And I studied it. I studied you. I'm sure you saw me like sitting on the ground in the driveway being like, watching how, okay, processing. Could I ever make a joke like that? What is the structure of a joke? Like,
no, that was not what I observed happening.
I was so captivated by this skill that I absolutely did not have. And it's something that I have actually cultivated in myself because I feel like one way to welcome people in is through humor. Yeah. It's okay to laugh here.
Yeah.
Like you're welcome here. Jokes
it's essential.
Welcome here.
Yeah.
We can take climate change seriously without taking ourselves seriously.
Must. Absolutely.
So the question is poorly formed, but it's like, what is it about maybe improv or the role of the jester that you see in this moment as maybe being underutilized? Is there like some advice you could give me as an expert in improv and comedy?
Well, I mean, clearly you absorbed the lessons of our youth, the driveway doctoral thesis I was giving in fart jokes and what's ups, but I think humor. You're absolutely right. I think that humor it connects us to ourselves. Connects us to who we are, binds us together. I think all art, and the funny thing is, a big part of what I've realized, there's a line of some of my poems that is the first poetry I ever heard was stand-up comics. George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, Lily Tomlin, Whoopi Goldberg, and all of these were tapes sent to me by our shared origin story, which is your mother, my Aunt Louise. When I was young, she was sending these
literally copying over cassette tapes and putting them in the mail to LA.
And she was the cool aunt, and all of the nieces and nephews got them. But for me, that was my first, because I think the great poets, the great comics are poets. When you think of the ones I mentioned, and you include now Dave Chappelle or Aziz Ansari, Louis C.K., like these different people that are able to recognize that there's a vulnerability, there's a humanity that and a storytelling that is at the root of great comedy, which is what I think ultimately brings us back to laughter, is to access and transcend pain or loss or heartbreak. And I think then at some point more and more poets do like stand-up dramedy and stand-up drama, which is that parallel of trying to process, because I think there are times when you're processing grief or, and the stuff that is at the root of some of what drives this book, the loss, and also says, how do we move through it? And how do we...
And the joke is the invitation to let your guard down.
Yes.
Right? Like there's actually studies on this. When you're receiving information through humor, you are much more open because you're laughing. You can't you're not fact checking and arguing. You're just like, that was hilarious. Tell me more.
It moves past your built-in defense systems that we feel, and we connect on a human level. And you're absolutely right. And I think it is also that says there are moments when the work must rest for a minute, right? If you put, especially when we're talking about revolution or we're talking about doing these things to save the world, to say at times, you worked hard enough to laugh, to dance, or
that we don't even have to earn those things.
We don't even have to, absolutely.
Them whenever we want, and they're free.
Absolutely.
But I think that the thing that probably you may remember most about my father was his laugh.
Oh, yeah.
It was so freaking loud.
Yeah.
Like this Jamaican man who would laugh from the depths of his soul as if it was the best possible medicine and release. Yeah. And you would go from shock to like, that was really loud, to like, I am clearly in this with you. Yeah. And you pointed out actually when we were just backstage that there's a page in the book from my dad's college notebook that I found when we were cleaning out my mom's house a few years ago, and I wanted to share that with you because
103.
I didn't know my father as an environmentalist, although he was the gardener in our family and the fisherman who understood, that we were part of the web of life in his own way.
Well, it makes, and coming from Jamaica too,
with the backyard
have such a more
chickens
direct,
and mango tree and all of that. But at Pratt College in the 60s, this is what he wrote on page 103, if anyone has a book. It is becoming increasingly evident that our society and all its institutions have not served the greater good of the larger segment of the population. The disenchantment, the alienation, and the bitterness which results manifest itself in violent upheavals. If our society is to survive, there will have to be dramatic, or, if you will, revolutionary changes which will correct the existing ills, and the restructuring should result in a better way of life for all. Let us now look at our economic system and the way in which our resources are distributed, the return that the use of these resources bring, and to who the profits accrue. It is an established fact that our natural resources are not unlimited, and yet we have abused them for centuries. And only now that the effect of this wastage is being felt do we hear a cry for conservation and a clamor for the greater respect for our ecosystem. And I found this after he had passed away and was like, how come we never talked about this, and to see it in his like architect's student handwriting was very sweet to me, but it made me realize that like these values of we are but part of a greater whole. To whom much is given, much is expected.
Absolutely.
You have to give back. You have to contribute. You can be very creative about how you do that. You can do that as a Black architect, opening the doors for others. You can do that as an English teacher, as my mother was,
Right.
Diversifying the high school curriculum for her students here in New York City so they would see themselves
Right.
in the stories. And she started an environmental club at Brooklyn Tech, right,
Sure.
with her students. So all these different ways of showing up were so remarkable to me, and it was just such a special childhood to live in a brownstone in Brooklyn. Play
Yes, Cumberland,
with,
Lafayette.
Thank you for blowing up my spot there. It's okay, we don't own that house anymore.
That's right, because they sold it to go buy organic farms upstate.
Put
And
them
that's
in
the-
a conservation
And that's the other
trust.
thing, too, is
Yeah.
the way in which, because you read what you just read from your father and say, how did we never talk about that? But clearly, it was spoken
came
without
through
words.
somehow.
Clearly,
Yeah.
and when you talk about your mother, sometimes we see teaching in direct ways, like I'm literally teaching you. But she showed up. She wasn't my teacher. She was my aunt, you know, and she was an elder. When I went to the New York Public the public theater, where I had to reach up to hold her hand, and she was the first one to bring me to Delacorte Theater to buy tickets for Broadway. That again transformed who I am. But she wasn't working to do it. It was done
This
without.
is cool. Let's go see.
It was done without effort, and I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing too, and we'll get to it in a little bit in terms of the Venn diagram, but those ways in which we show up in politics, how we engage in conversations, especially hard ones, how we lead each other towards the stories of who we are or who we wish to be, and find out where we fall in the middle. And I wonder, in terms of, as you talk of teachers and you talk of sort of some of those foundational upbringings, maybe if I may, could you tell us a little bit more about some of those foundational
Yeah.
elements?
Well, this is a very special night to be asked that question because my science teacher from like first grade is here, Mrs. Christensen.
Where is she? Stand up!
Stand up.
Oh my goodness. Now,
What she does not know, what Ms. Christensen does not know is or she may know, that she is in the acknowledgments section of the book because it is those people when you're young that change your life.
Yeah.
And I remember very specifically a few stories. One was she brought to class a cow's brain in a styrofoam cup.
Wow.
And I was like, this is disgusting, but I also have so many questions, and yes, I would like to hold it.
Yeah.
Right? And that mix of like confusion and gross out and fascination and like wanting to understand, and how did it end up in a cup, and like where did you get it? I guess from a butcher. And like I'm putting all these pieces together, and I was just like, it's so small. Right? Does that mean that cows are not as smart? And so just like being led through this
And also, like, I'm opposed to the styrofoam. I'm fundamentally.
I was not yet opposed to styrofoam. I was, yes, this was like 1986. I didn't know better yet.
Yes.
But I think and I also remember, and she was sort of like encouraging us to not be scared and to touch it and to explore it. And I was like, okay, I can do this, right? And to be pushed comfortably beyond your limits is such a gift. I have two other memories. One is that she had assigned us some homework that involved the word muscle. and asked us who knew how to spell it the next day in class. And I was like, oh, damn. I looked it up in the dictionary or whatever. I did the homework, but I did not remember how to spell it. And it just was that reminder that you really got to know what you're talking about, because you want to impress your favorite teacher, you better come correct. And so just those people in your life that hold the bar high enough for you is really important at all ages, of course. Yeah. And then you taught a cooking class that my mother enrolled me in after school. And I remember we were mixing up something, and I was not the cool kid really ever. I've been trying to make up for it ever since. Yeah, well,
clearly you have arrived. You sang Prince with Stacey Abrams. That's
okay.
pretty.
Thank you. I'm here. We're good now. Yeah. And so she was teaching this cooking class, and it was my turn to stir, and I stood up with the wooden spoon to stir. All the other kids stirred sitting down, and they made fun of me. They're like, why are you standing up? It's not that hard to stir. And she was like, serious cooks cook standing up. Yeah. And I was like, yes, she's got my back, right? And also it's true. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so just that
you had to get more shoulder into it.
Yeah, I was like, let's do it up, right?
Keep your styrofoam cups separate, cake and cow heart.
Totally separate. There's a different recipe. And so it was just one of those very magical moments of my childhood, all these different lessons that I'll remember clearly for a very long time. It stuck with me and just sparked my early interest in science, that I could be a scientist, that science was welcoming to me. We don't have any other scientists in our family. And so that was just oh, well, this is a thing we could be, right?
Sure.
And then there's another group here tonight that really shaped my love of science and future in science, which is the School for Field Studies. Who's here from that group? In the back. Oh, yes. You guys got
Field
a
Studies,
whole row.
stand up.
So I made a really good decision in college, which was to study abroad in Turks and Caicos. I was like, I am nailing this. We are snorkeling every day. We are hanging out with fishermen. We are learning the Latin names of all the coral reef species. And we are gaining an appreciation that ocean conservation is marine ecology, yes, but also the socioeconomics and the policy of it all as well. Yeah. And what is a marine protected area but an interdisciplinary research project? So, thank you. And so that was the invitation, which was figuring out how to save the planet is a big puzzle. Sure. And let me learn enough about all the different pieces so that I can be helpful.
Which was part then of your process through from elementary school to PhD to where you are now, is deciding what part of this field you wanted to go into, right? Whether you were going to be a teacher, a scientist, a policy maker, be out in the field, researcher.
Or just never ever choose.
Or just scuba dive. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't think we were going to get her back from that island when she was out there scuba diving. And so I see you have flashcards that were brought to you.
We have to keep it moving. We got into the cousin riffing family zone, and we have not stayed on script at all.
I mean, a little bit.
Shockingly. And so we have a little exercise for all of us to do together, which is to think about what each of our roles can be in climate solutions. So many of you have probably seen this before or heard me talk about this before, but my strong opinion is that we should each be bringing whatever skills we have to the work of climate solutions. So what are you good at? Your skills, your resources, your networks. Think expansively and be generous with yourself about what you're good at. What work needs doing? So the climate and justice solutions, there are innumerable. And what brings you joy? There's sources of satisfaction and delight. Not that we have to be giggling every time we answer an email, but there has to be this punctuation.
But it's not sustainable if it's driven by misery and I must.
We'll burn out, and also it won't be very welcoming if people are like, "Oh, who's that cranky, awful person?" And so we're just going to play you a song, some Jamaican vibes to remind me of my dad, while you fill this out, and then we'll move on to questions. Thank you, Eric. Crank it.
Yes. Music to save the world too. hands if you need help.
So the invitation is, of course, to move beyond the generic list that a lot of us are familiar with from media, from environmental groups, to vote, protest, donate, spread the word, lower your carbon footprint. And please do those things. I continue to do those things. But if we don't bring our superpowers to this work, we're really missing out on the opportunity for helping to create transformative change. And I would posit that if you don't know what to do at this very moment, the most important thing you can do is support candidates who get it on climate up and down the ballot. So these two organizations I've been volunteering with, taking on tour with me in various ways the last month, Environmental Voter Project is created on the premise that there are 8 million people who are already registered to vote in the U.S., already had environment as their number one issue, and failed to vote in the 2020 election. Right. 8 million people, and we know how close these elections are. So this group is just encouraging people who are environmentalists, who are not regular voters, to go cast their ballot. So it's the easiest phone banking you can do. You don't have to talk about a candidate. You just have to remind people to vote. Do you know where your polling place is, et cetera, and build that muscle of turning them into regular voters.
Just, activate that energy into action.
Yeah. And then Lead Locally is all about supporting local climate candidates who are running on a strong climate platform. So you can find out more about both of these. We've got 2 weeks left to support people who want to preserve a habitable planet. Yes. So if you've been waiting for an invitation or the moment to
you are cordially invited.
This is your welcome.
welcome.
I'm going to announce soon I'm hosting a bunch of phone banks in the next 2 weeks. So if you want to do it with me, you can do it with me on Zoom. And this is all on the website for the book, which is getitright.earth. You don't have to QR code it right now. And this is when we were going to read you a poem, which I think we will actually skip because we are running low on time. But it is my favorite poem to be of use that appears in both All We Can Save and this book. So that is there for you.
And it's in the book.
It's in the book. If you want to check out the book from the library to find it,
that's
you
right.
can do that. And I have a present for you, which is this. I made you a mixtape.
She did.
That song is on it. We're going to hear more music from it as you are coming in, as you're leaving tonight.
Tunes for tenacity.
This is the playlist is inside the back cover of the book. For those who haven't seen that yet. Boop, 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 boop.
Howard Zinn never put a mixtape in a book.
I mean,
Come
Howard, slacker.
on, you slept on a chance.
What could have been? This is also on the book's website if you don't catch this now. Okay, so we've got some questions from the audience I'm going to try to get through. Some climate activists would posit that climate solutions must be increasingly anti-capitalist. How might you respond, and how has that claim related to your engagements with financiers? Good question.
I'm glad you asked. My thoughts on that. Oh, why don't you take this one, Ayana?
Oh, my pleasure, Steve. So one of the things that came up repeatedly in the book was that shareholder capitalism in its current form, this relentless pursuit of maximizing quarterly earnings, is completely out of touch with the climate goals that we need to reach. But also that capitalism is, for better or worse, the situation in which we currently find ourselves. So the question is, how do we keep moving forward with climate solutions, given that we live in a capitalist society and we don't have like 10 or 20 years to take a break from climate solutions to create a whole new economic system?
Right.
So there's a bit of the fix the plane while flying it thing.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the right metaphor
I think it is.
for this, but...
Leap and the net appears.
And how does this... So my answer to this personally is that, I think at heart I'm just really practical and a realist. And so I have certainly my wishes and ideals, but I also just wake up every day and think about how I can help us have the best possible future.
Right.
And what is my piece of that? And if I'm able to talk to people who are influencing where investments are going, who are helping to shape economic policy, those are conversations I want to be having, even though I can't end capitalism.
Right.
Even though I feel like we're stuck with this for the foreseeable future. And there are ways you'll read about in the book, like what would it look like to sort of twist capitalism to our needs
Sure.
while acknowledging that this is what we've got.
Right.
So I would say read the Follow the Money section for more on that. Let's see. In the past, things like Central Park and the National Park System were not necessarily popular when they were created, but have stood the test of time. Are there lessons in this for the future? I hope so. I just got back from Grand Teton National Park last weekend. It was amazing. I think national parks are incredible. They also have a fraught history of displacement and trampling on Indigenous rights. This was the last essay I wrote for my Substack newsletter was about this.
Which you can follow her on. It's also on her Instagram.
Feel free to subscribe. What if we get it right at Substack? Yeah. So the thing that I feel like has changed is that politicians are much more followers now than they are leaders. To be brave and create a national park system, to have that kind of leadership and courage is just, we're lacking in that now, and there's so much gridlock and partisanship in Congress that it's actually hard to get anything very big done. Sure. The Inflation Reduction Act was a remarkable exception to that rule. The fact that we have almost $1 billion between that and the Infrastructure Act going to climate solutions is truly something that no one could have predicted at the beginning of the Biden administration. Sure. And so everybody who helped to make that happen, thank you, because that has created hundreds of thousands of clean energy jobs just in the last 2 years. All these tax credits for us to be able to electrify our homes. I got solar panels and a hot water heat pump this year because of those tax credits, right? We're seeing what happens when governments try to do something big and can somehow push that through. The deciding vote was Vice President Harris in the Senate to pass that. That's how close that was.
Pay attention, pay attention.
And so this election, to your point, is like, do we get to keep on that track, or do we go in a completely different trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions as a planet?
And in this idea of story as an act of survival, you just see each of them are telling two powerful stories of what America is, what humanity is, what our values are, and we as a society have to decide which story we want to invest in.
Yeah.
And I think that last idea in terms of what you were just saying that's so profound is the idea of, if in a world where we get it right, politics, the idea of being a politician is to go back to this idea of being a servant to the public and not being in business to get reelected, but be in business to do good for your constituents.
Yeah.
So,
okay, what brings you hope in this work?
yes.
I have a tenuous relationship with hope. I'm not an optimist. People assume that because I'm joyful, I must be hopeful, but thank God that those are separate things. I would say there's a chapter in the book called A Note on Hope, which elaborates on that. And so I don't think that hope is a prerequisite for action, for rolling up your sleeves. I think we can harness that Martin Luther King spirit of I may not get there with you, and just do your part to try to create the future you want to live in and you want future generations to live in, even though there's no guarantee of the result of our efforts. So I would say don't worry so much about hope and just worry about being useful instead of being hopeful. I think that relieves a lot of the pressure for me for getting started.
I would also counter the idea that you're not an optimist, even if you have rewired yourself into thinking of what an optimist is. Your work is the dictionary deeply optimistic,
which is you assume that the outcome will be good. I do not assume that. It could be better or worse.
But your work and your life is an investment in the belief that a good outcome is possible. Of course not. And I'm a poet, so we get to make up our own definition. So.
Oh, right. This is the problem. Everyone has their own definition of word. But my approach is to just be relentless, tenacious, as a contributor to making sure we have the best possible future. Even though I know the odds are incredibly long,
Sure.
there is a wide range of futures we could have, and it really matters that we get as close to the best one as possible. And so this last question is a yes or no question for both of us.
Okay.
What do you...
Yes.
Art unfreezes the ice inside us. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, on that note,
There you go.
we are going to do one final thing together.
I look forward to it. I have to say one sentence about, she talks about long odds from a playground in Brooklyn and a driveway in Spokane. Somehow
where
the
this is
two of
going.
us are at the New York Public Library celebrating your New York Times best-selling book. So I think long odds are in your favor.
Okay, well, thank you, cousin. More to come.
And this is how we get there.
I've got some new tricks up my sleeve for 2025. Stay tuned. But for now, a lot of people I interviewed in this book brought up the phrase "do no harm" from the ancient Greek Hippocratic Oath, and the need for a new version of that for this moment in human history to commit to being part of climate solutions. So my friend Juana Stanescu and I wrote one. It's on page 422. These lines on this slide are just the highlights of that, so you can find the whole thing in there with my answer, Steve, is like, this is the poem I have written most recently.
Yeah, I love that. Recite, please. Maybe it's a group poem.
I will ask you all to recite the lines on the slide with me when I get there. How about that?
Love it.
I'm going to read you the whole poem. It's just one page. We got this. Climate Oath. On the majesty of turquoise seas and fireflies and aspen trees, on the honor of our parents, our ancestors, and humans to come, on the wonders of laughter and sunshine, I make these devotions to climate solutions for my community and for our magnificent planet. First, move from I to we.
First, move from I to we.
We will expand our sense of interdependence. We will rein in our sense of individualism. We will ask, what should we do together? Survival is collective. Our fates are intertwined. Second, do no harm.
Second, do no harm.
We will restore and heal, not pollute and deplete. We will regenerate ecosystems and our own resolve. We will live lightly as part of the earth. Accountability, generosity, and sweetness. Third, less is more.
Third, less is more.
We will expand our creativity and contract our consumerism. We will conserve and distinguish between needing and wanting. We will be gentle with our own perfections and others. There is such a thing as enough. Basta. Possibility exists.
Possibility exists.
This is a world of our making. We can remake it, remix it, restore it, rebalance it. The path of least resistance is only one of many paths. I will be part of getting it right.
I will be part of getting it right.
We will be part of getting it right.
We will be part of getting it right.
Thank you for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, the optimist and the poet, Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, my cousin.
We did it!
We did it!
DJ Eric, play us out.
Bring it.
A little Prince for you.
There it is.